Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sultana Sessions. This is episode 6, if I've counted right, and we are calling this our Introduction to Aquaponics. You can see I've got a colleague of mine, former colleague of mine, Lauren Croissant, frozen in video form, because the project that we're going to be talking about tonight was basically all her doing. So Lauren came to Sultana Education Foundation last August as a member of the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. That's a tremendous program that we've taken advantage of for the past 4 or 5 years. They've always sent us really talented people. We're fortunate to be one of the host organizations. And as most of us know, this was anything but a typical year. So Lauren came to us, and the job that she ended up doing looked way different than the job she signed up for. But she really flourished in her role. She did a lot of maintaining our WetLab, which is home to many of our critters, and that's almost a full-time job on its own. But in addition to that, Lauren taught a lot of our virtual classroom sessions, our toddler times, and so it was really neat to see the skills that she brought to us as a teacher, but also she continued to grow and develop those skills. So Lauren recently left us for a new position, a full-time position, where another one of her passions is trail work and trail maintenance. So she's going to be leading a trail crew down in the Shenandoah area, building and maintaining hiking trails. So we wish her good luck in that, and I'm sure she's going to have a great time. But before she left, she put together a video for us explaining this aquaponics system. So part of being a Chesapeake Conservation Corps member, they have a capstone project, and this is what Lauren chose for her capstone. And before I get too much more into that, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping, because if you're on our email list, you know that this has been a busy week for Sultana, for the organization. Probably the most exciting email we've sent in a long time came out just yesterday. We are now hiring crew for the schooner Sultana. So we will be sailing again in this, our 20th anniversary season. We also announced that we just hired a new captain, Captain Forrest Richards, his first task will be overseeing the uprigging of Sultana and getting her sailing for the first time in many months now. If that name sounds familiar, it certainly does to me, because Forrest and I were crewmates together on the John Smith Shallop, which Sultana launched in 2007. So it's always great to have old familiar faces come back, and Forrest certainly knows the schooner well, knows Chestertown well, and I know this has always been a job he's had his eye on as kind of a dream job for him. So it's really fun to see that come to fruition. So if you see Forrest around town, please be sure to congratulate him. Also on the news of the schooner, downrigging will be back. We've been getting a lot of questions. Are you going to do downrigging? Yes, exactly what it will look like to be decided, but we've gotten preliminary authorization from the town of Chestertown. You can go ahead and circle the dates in your calendar, October 29th through 31st. Easy to remember, Halloween weekend. We will have some version of our Sultana downrigging, tall ships, and bluegrass festival. And exactly what that will be will continue to evolve as, day to day, week to week, information changes, and we will do our best to act accordingly. And then this is almost our final Sultana session. I'm going to do one more 2 weeks from now, but then summer camps get here, and I'm way too busy. I love you guys, but I'm way too busy to be talking to you on the computer. I'll be busy maybe entertaining your children or grandchildren, nieces and nephews. And then the final thing I'll call to your attention is our annual gala. We are having an in-person gala, September 18th. Please circle that date. And you can go to the website sultanagala.org and see all the details, but exciting news about that. Spectacular band, the Hudson Horns, is going to be playing that event. So it should be a good time. Okay, so with that, housekeeping out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and let Lauren talk to you for a bit. Uh, I'm here to answer questions. Obviously, what Laura put is pre-recorded, so she's not ignoring you. I may stop her video every now and then to answer questions, and then after her piece is finished, she made about a 16-minute video. After that's finished, I can show you the updates because what she filmed is about a month old at this point, and things have changed a bit. Okay, so here we go. Here is Lauren.
Hi everybody, my name is Lauren Croissant and I was the Chesapeake Conservation Corps member stationed here at Sultana Education Foundation. So for part of my year of service, the program has us come up with a capstone project, something that we're interested in, something that we can take the lead on, and something that will help our host organizations out. So for mine, I decided to incorporate an aquaponics system into the WetLab here at Sultana. So there are kind of a couple factors going into that decision. The first one, I'd done a little bit of aquaponics in high school, but it didn't go too well. Long story short, there ended up being a lot of dead fish, and that's something I wanted to redeem in this project. Partially because we talk a lot about plants outside at Sultana, which is great, but it gets cold in Maryland, so we want to have an opportunity to talk about plants inside in the wet lab, which has a lot of animals right now, but not so many plants, so this is a good way to talk about plants. We also wanted a new education tool in the world of virtual learning. We've been talking a lot about our turtles and our fish, and we want to have new stuff to talk about and teach students. And the last thing I decided would factor into this decision would be I have to clean a lot of tanks as part of my job. We're at about a dozen different habitats right now, and this one doesn't need any tank maintenance once it's set up. So that sounded real appealing, just to have something I didn't have to clean and bring into that rotation. So I've been talking a lot about aquaponics setups, and you're probably wondering what that is. That's okay. Here to help clear that up, aquaponics is definitely not a word that's thrown out a lot in conversation. So it's literally a combination of two words, aquaculture and hydroponics. So with aquaculture is raising aquatic animals mostly used for food. This tank is really small, so we won't be eating any of the fish that we put in it. In reality, we'll be putting in fish that are about this big, maybe an inch or two, so those won't make for very good eating. And so then we move on to the other part of the word, which is hydroponics, which means growing plants without soil. So when you combine those two together, you get aquaponics, which is incorporating raising fish or other aquatic animals and growing plants without soil. So this type of system is kind of an ecosystem approach to raising food, and it all works together and flows in a cycle. So now I'm going to show you how that works on our setup we have here. So eventually there will be fish in this tank. We're still getting it acclimated and ready for them to go in. So when the fish are in this tank, they will produce a very nutrient-dense waste, which is called ammonia in this case. So this pump will turn on and pump that wastewater up to this grow bed up here. And you can't see this at all. I can't even see it. There are helpful bacteria colonies growing in these pebbles up here. And they are converting that ammonia, which is toxic to the plants and fish, into usable forms, in this case, nitrates. So those bacteria convert the ammonia into nitrate, which the plants can uptake through their roots and use as fertilizer. And so when the plants take that nitrate up, they take it out of the water, which makes the water clean, and send it back down to the fish. And that continues on in a cycle all the way around. Filming. All right, so you're probably wondering why aquaponic systems are so important for this region of the world. And to show you why, I'm going to zoom out a lot to talk about this concept of a watershed. So as we're zooming out, here is what we call the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. And a watershed is an area of land that stores water before it drains into a common body of water. So any water on this land will likely end up in this blue region down here, which is the Chesapeake Bay. Now that's a ton of land for a relatively small body of water. That is 64,000 square miles of land that impact the Chesapeake Bay. And so there are different types of land within that watershed. So this is illustrated on the map in different colors. So this red and gray area you see interspersed through it, that represents areas of high development, which is usually big cities. So here you can see Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, for example. Now, this yellow color is agricultural land. Now, there's a ton of agricultural land within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Now, this is really important. It's a big economic force in the region. It provides lots of food for lots of people. But sometimes farming techniques aren't the most sustainable. So, lots of times, farmers might add herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers, which help keep pests and other plants away and help the plants grow, but sometimes those things will wind up in the Chesapeake Bay. And you're probably wondering, why does that matter? Well, that matters because when these chemicals end up in the Chesapeake Bay, they create dead zones, which is basically areas of water where there's no oxygen, so nothing can survive there. And when that happens, that means you're probably not going to find any fish there or other seafood to eat. The plants and animals are all gone, so that's a big loss of biodiversity in an area. And you're probably not going to want to recreate there. You're not going to be able to go fishing there. It's probably not a good idea for you to go boating there or anything like that. So it's a big economic loss as well as loss of the natural world. Now, with an aquaponics system, especially in this region, that lessens the impact of those things going into the bay because aquaponic systems don't need herbicides, they don't need pesticides, they don't need fertilizers. That's happening naturally with the fish waste. So that's decreasing the amount of those chemicals that would otherwise end up in the Chesapeake Bay. So to kind of highlight some of that importance, the aquaponic systems can produce 10 times as much crops in the same amount of land, which is crazy. You can produce way more crops for using less land and less resources. It also uses 85 to 90% less water than your traditional agriculture because all of the water stays within the system in that loop instead of being lost into the ground. It's essentially just you doing this more amount of work with less resources, like I said earlier. And another important thing, you can grow crops all year round. It's inside. You don't have to worry about frost coming or being covered by snow. You can produce food all year round, which is really important, especially as populations continue to grow and those cities continue to develop and expand, and as we're losing farmland. So overall, it's just a really efficient and sustainable method of agriculture, not to necessarily replace traditional agriculture, but to be used to supplement that and to produce more food and harm the environment less.
And we're filming.
So a lot of you might be wondering how we kind of got this system set up, and there are kind of three main phases. First is actually building it. Second is the cycling process, and third is adding fish. Right now we are in phase 2, but I will go ahead and talk about our first 2 phases and then get into our adding fish phase later. So the first part of building, it was super easy to set up. There were tons of instructions that came with the kit that we ordered, so that was no problem. And I'm going to kind of zoom in and teach you all about the components of the system. So first, we have a fish tank. That's where our fish will eventually live. Obviously a super important part of the system. That's where all of the water is stored when it's not running. So if you look back here, there is a bubbler. It's that little stone with a bunch of bubbles coming out, and that is powered by that blue motor in the back there. And that is helping the fish once we add them, because fish like to have a lot of dissolved oxygen in their water, so that helps keep them healthier and happier. And then we have this fun little light bar in the back. That's not really doing anything harmful or helpful for the system. It just came with it, and I think it looks cool, and I like playing with the programming settings. And then next we have this green stick right here. That is a heater. That is helping to create an environment for bacteria to grow, just warming up that water. It keeps it at a constant 25 degrees Celsius. Now, probably the most important part is this black box right here. That is a pump. So what that's doing is sucking up all of the water and all of the waste in it and pumping it up through this tube up to our grow bed. Now we'll kind of look at what's in our grow bed. Right now we have these clay pebbles. They look kind of like Cocoa Puffs. What that's doing, that's serving as soil for our plants. It's providing helping support the plant's roots and helping it grow, have something to anchor to. That's also where all of the nitrifying bacteria is growing, for them to convert the harmful ammonia into beneficial nitrates for the plants to take up. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of different plants growing in here. We're still trying to figure out what's an optimal planting scheme. We have some arugula and collard greens and Swiss chard. That is to feed our turtles. We have a lot of omnivorous turtles here at Sultana, and we like to give them some plants and leaves to eat. So this will help in that process. Instead of us having to go to the grocery store every time we run out of lettuce, we can grow our own. It's also going to be a little cheaper in the long run as well. And then once the plants take up some of the nitrates in the water, that water cycles back down to the fish tank through these little outlet tubes right here. Our pump is only running for 15 minutes of every hour. That just helps the roots not be completely saturated with water. We can adjust that as we want or don't want, but that's kind of what's up with the system. I hope that was beneficial to you all. Now, the second part, which we are currently in, is called cycling. And essentially what cycling is providing an environment for those helpful bacteria to grow. And what we want to do is help kickstart that bacteria before we add fish, so we don't kill them. So what I'm doing is I am literally adding ammonia to the tank to give them kind of a food to eat, the bacteria that is, because if there's no food for them to eat, they don't want to be here, they'll be elsewhere. So I'm adding ammonia to the tank, and those bacteria are working hard to convert that into nitrites and nitrates, which nitrates are the ones that the plants will be taking up. So essentially we're just working on getting that cycling started. We want to see the ammonia and nitrite level drop to 0 and the nitrates be at a nice low level. That's when we'll know it's time to add the fish. So as part of that, I've been collecting a lot of data about every day with how much ammonia is in the tank and nitrates, and we are getting very close to being able to add fish. And one thing you can do, you can kind of let the bacteria grow naturally, or you can buy some at this pet store or online and add that to help make it move a little faster. That's what we've done these past 2 weeks to kind of help speed this process up. Hopefully by now you're really excited about aquaponics and all the cool stuff it does, and you might be wondering, can I do this at home or can I do this in my classroom? For you teachers out there, the easiest answer is yes. This is absolutely possible for you to do at home and at school. We happen to get ours from Carolina Biological. It is a pre-made kit, so you just have to follow the directions to get it set up. And there are tons of options out there on the market, things about this size, some even smaller. Ours happens to be an Aqua Sprouts garden. That's just the one we decided on for this space, but there are tons of options out there. For you DIY aficionados out there, you can also build your own system from scratch. I recommend doing a ton of research before you start that. There's a ton of stuff that goes into it, everything from grow lights to the types of fish to tanks and pumps and all of that. So to get you started, you might want to check out the aquaponicssource.com or Go Green Aquaponics. Those are some good resources for people wanting to build their own systems. Now you might see this and say, oh, that's kind of complicated, that's a lot of moving parts. I just want to grow some herbs and leafy greens in my own house. So there are some even simpler, cheaper options that just don't even use fish. So first off, we have this hydroponics system here, and that takes fish completely out of the equation. We just have some nutrient solution in this reservoir here, and the roots are down in this reservoir, and it helps the plants grow. Very small, very compact, not very expensive. Not to say the aquaponics system was incredibly expensive either. This is just even cheaper. And then we have this system here using traditional soil It is, I believe, a Root View farm, also from Carolina, biological. You can really see the roots growing in here. We're growing some lima beans right now. This one is super cheap and it's a good way to grow some plants inside in your house or your classroom. Now we got a grant to fund all of this, so I'm just going to shout out Chesapeake Bay Trust. Thank you so much from Sultana Education Foundation. So as far as goals go with our aquaponics setup, we have a couple in mind specifically. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our turtles are omnivorous, meaning they eat plants and meat. Here's one of our favorites here at Sultana. This is Leonardo, and he really loves eating his leafy greens. So here at Sultana, we really like to have hands-on experiences as part of our learning curriculum. So we have this wonderful space in the WetLab here where we can house all of these animals for students to use as an education tool. But it costs a lot of money to feed them. So our aquaponics setup will help mitigate some of the costs and alleviate it because we can grow our own food. But in addition to growing our own food, we can use that as a teaching tool in itself. We can use it to talk about fish or plant growth or bacteria, ecosystems, statistical design. The sky is the limit with aquaponics setups when it comes to education. So we hope to continue using that well into the future, as well as using it as a tool to encourage dialogue surrounding sustainable agriculture in a community that relies very heavily on agriculture.
Thanks so much for that, Lauren. That was great information. I know I learned a lot when I was editing that video, watching, and so I'm sure you all just learned a lot. And let me show you what's going on now. You might see the system behind me here, and depending on how good your eyesight is, you might see that we've got some fish added to it. So Lauren talked about the system being in stage 2, and now you can see we're in stage 3. So we've got some mosquito fish swimming around in there. And I actually pulled one out to show you. Pulled this out from another tank because I don't want to mess up the balance of that tank. But here is one of those mosquito fish darting around. So why did we choose this type of fish? Well, they're small, right? So in general, the smaller the fish, the less stress it's going to put on an environment. A large fish needs a lot of oxygen, needs more space to swim around. Right now we have about 5 fish in that tank. Eventually we can probably get up to 10, but we're slowly introducing them to make sure we've got a nice balance here. Some interesting things about mosquito fish. Based on their name, you can probably guess they like eating mosquito larvae. In fact, I learned a new term about them called larvivores, which means that primarily their diet is eating those juvenile mosquitoes. So because of this, a lot of communities introduce them and to try to control their mosquito population. The problem is the larvivores will eat almost any kind of larva, including other insects that might hunt adult mosquitoes. So like a lot of times when people try to think that we understand nature better than nature, we accidentally make things worse. So one of the great things we can teach with this type of system is that nature is a balance, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to replicate here, the balance of energy going to the plants, the fish feeding, their waste being pumped up to feed the plants, the bacteria helping to process that waste before the plants get to it. And this system is not, I mean, this is kind of a fancier version of it, but aquaponics is something that's been around as far back as the Aztecs. People have understood this kind of balance, and we've tried to replicate it. It's gained more steam recently as fish farming has picked up, because as you can imagine, if we're growing small fish here, obviously this isn't going to be anyone's dinner. But if you are running, say, a tilapia farm with big tanks, you're producing lots of fish waste. And that's one of the things that fish farmers were struggling with is, what do we do with this waste? You can't just, pump it into our water systems. And one of the things they discovered was using bacteria and plants to help process that waste. All right, Lauren also introduced you to Raphael. All right, here's Raphael, our yellow-bellied slider. And so what I'm going to do is see if Raphael's hungry. And I'm going to take a sprig of arugula here. And let's see, we'll put Raphael here, and we can show you. Here's Raphael. Getting used to the new container I put him in. Let's see, look what's there. And then while he decides if he wants to eat or not, he may be camera shy. He may be trying to escape still. Another system that we have here that I can show you. I'll move him back to the clear tank. And you can keep an eye on Raphael and see if he decides to eat right now. So another system that we have here is our vermicomposter. So we mentioned that most of the organisms that live here are omnivores. So we can also grow meat for them, meat in the form of earthworms. And so let me dig around in here and see if maybe that's more his speed. So what this is we put organic materials in here, just like you might compost at home, your apple core. All right, and here we've got a worm we'll drop in there too. And so this is also continuing that process where we've got natural materials decomposing, breaking down. The worms help with that process. They reproduce in here, and we're able to supplement a lot of the food costs for these organisms, the fish and whatnot that live in here, by feeding them the worms. Another clever thing we do sometimes in this lab, we might do dissections, oyster dissections. And after we dissect, we don't throw away those oyster guts, we feed them to the organism. So we're always trying to think of ways to cleverly use our resources. And Raphael is not cooperating with me, but we'll see if we can get someone else to eat. We're going to take this worm over. Oh, that went really quickly. I'm going to have to do that again. So Raphael may not be eating right now, but our bluegill sunfish will. Let me grab another worm here. Okay. Try to get you a better look at it, because that went quickly. All right, here is our bluegill sunfish. This is also a freshwater fish like the mosquito fish. And look at him looking at it. Boom, you see that? So the circle of life playing out in Sultana's wet lab, and this really great system that Lauren put together for us is great because, as she mentioned, this is something that we can use throughout the year. Times when groups might come here in the winter when it's just not pleasant to be outside, and plants and how they process things and how that affects the water, it's all being contained right here in this one system. So that's about it for tonight's presentation. I hope you had fun and you learned a few things. I hope, unlike Raphael, you eat your vegetables with dinner. And I hope you'll tune back in 2 weeks on May 27th when I will take you outside. I'm going to be taking a tour of the Lawrence Wetlands Preserve, showing you what it looks like today, and also giving you an idea of what our plans are for the future. So thank you so much and have a great evening.